Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everybody. This is my first CAD, and my biggest observation so far is that in every session, it's mandatory to mention Mark Ritson's name. Apparently, if you say it 3 times, he'll appear. Is that true?
Yes.
Mark is relevant to this conversation because we wanted Mark's endorsement of this study. Confessions of a CMO is a study about influence in the C-suite. It's the only type of study that's ever been done, because the reality is once you get into the C-suite, the role is less about marketing, it's less M and more C. And that was Mark's quote when we went through this. Because so much of the success of a CMO is about influencing parts of the business that they don't control. Growth isn't just going to come from comms and advertising, it's going to come from primarily from the product. If we have people who deliver our brand, thank you, I was like great juggling here. We rely on the success of others in order to drive growth, in order to build brand, whether that's partnering with employer brand, with product, with innovation, with customer service and operations. And so we wanted to get try and understand, how do CMOs build influence? And so that's why we have 2 CMOs here to talk about this. Now, the key about the study was it was completely anonymous. And every session was like a therapy session. So it's a bit of a paradox that now we're talking about this out in the open. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about experiences that the CMOs have had and look at some of the things that we learned through the study. So let's dive straight in and talk about this topic of influence. And Kat, you have such an interesting background, because before really embarking on your full marketing journey, you almost had a first-hand view into influence in the C-suite, because you worked at Square and you were an executive assistant or chief of staff to Jack Dorsey. Right? So tell us what you learned about influence in the C-suite right at the start, that then you were able to carry through once you actually got into the C-suite yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so my background is that I came from Square. That's where I started, I think in 2011. And I was Jack's CA. And he is someone who I really look up to and think very highly of. You know, he's an absolute visionary. And working for him in those early years is something that I wouldn't trade anything for. It was like the most invaluable lesson that I could have ever been lucky enough and fortunate enough to have. And it was great because I joined the company when there was less than 100 people. I was really at his right hand for every major conversation that was pushing what was then very much a startup forward into what eventually became a public company. And I think we went public in 2015. And that was an incredible experience. I was only in that position for about 18 months, but it was like an absolute incredible sort of apprenticeship, just learning everything, absorbing everything, getting access to the top brass at Square, which was incredible. And there were some really awesome executives under Jack at that time as well. Sarah Fryer was our CFO. She's now CFO at OpenAI. Keith Boys was our COO when I started. So I learned from a lot of really, really incredible powerhouse people just about how to move something small forward. And obviously now I'm at Coinbase and I'm not exactly starting on the ground floor, but I'm applying a lot of those lessons to how we evolve and push through. And what's really interesting about both of these companies is that, you know, both products, I'd say, sit at the intersection of big tech and finance, which aren't exactly industries that give people the warm and fuzzies. So I've sort of spent the last 15 years or so of my career trying to bring a really authentic voice to products that are primarily centered in utility. And I think, you know, prior to some of the work at Cash App or some of the things that we're doing at Coinbase, what I used to see in this world was really just a lot of sterility. And I'm pretty excited to be bringing a little bit more like authenticity and life to those categories in the way that we move forward now.
Can you share with us a little any stories, moments of absurdities from having been in the boardroom back then? Things that you might have, I can't believe this conversation is happening within a C-suite.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I got to sit in on a lot of board meetings, which was really cool. And there were some like epic board members over time at Square. I mean, I think we had Vinod Khosla, Larry Summers, Roloff Botha, like just a ton of really incredible people. And yeah, I mean, it was interesting. One time I was in a board meeting and Larry Summers totally fell asleep. I don't know if that's clippable content, maybe not. But there's a ton of things that we learned just early on that were really fascinating. I'd say like Jack is one of the most incredible CEOs in that he is so future and forward looking that it's almost like he could see into the future from where we were sitting. Like even products that have sort of taken over today, like even like Apple Pay, he was talking about those types of wallet products really, really early on at Square. And it's almost he could see people paying with their phone back in 2010. It was crazy.
Jennifer, we were talking in the green room about the importance of being able to influence other departments and functions at Indeed, and Indeed also owns Glassdoor, and we started to wonder, well, you think about from a brand authenticity standpoint, if you go and look at Glassdoor reviews, they should be good, right? So employer brand has ended up becoming something that's really important for you to influence as well, because that's a key part of the authentic nature that can translate then into a narrative for Indeed.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, now employer brand has moved under my organization for exactly that reason. And when I joined Indeed, I'm going to take a few steps back and talk about. I started my career on the advertising agency side, and just as it relates to influence, one thing that I wish I understood more was we all saw it as a win if the CMO bought the idea. We're like, great, home run, like we're done, right? Without really realizing once I transitioned from the agency side to being a CMO at Radio Shack and some other brands, how much work happened even after that moment sometimes internally to get the idea across the line and how much influence the CMO even still had to have on others within the company. So I do think that's important. And same thing, at Indeed, whereas we had a campaign that ran for a few years, and it was all about better work leads to better lives. And we wanted to show people that they could come to Indeed, and we wanted them to understand they could also look at ratings and reviews. And so prior to interviewing for a company, really understand the culture. It was more than just a transactional thing, and bringing that to life. And then we're like, what do our ratings and reviews look like at Indeed as well as on Glassdoor? And it's a great company culture. We were experiencing a lot of transformation, some perks that were going away because, hey, COVID and times were tougher and those things. And just, really realizing that it's like you've got to start internally if you're going to make a promise like that, and make sure you're doing the right things internally for your people if you're going to go out and make that brand promise. And so really had to help people understand how what we were saying externally had to match what was going on internally in the business that we were in, and that we needed to put a lot more focus on that at the time.
And your comment about having to sell in the work once it's sold to you really gets to the heart of the conversations and the interviews we have. And that's why this notion of getting into the aspect of the CMO role that is a bit of a corporate dark art. And what we learned by speaking completely anonymously to 40 CMOs, when we started to look at the data, we started to see that there was a bit of a segmentation around how they create influence. And so we thought it'd be fun to try and give names to some of these different approaches around what they lean into more naturally to create influence. So some of you in the back of the room can't see this. There is the CMO from an influence standpoint is more of chief mutiny officer. There's the chief missing officer. The chief missing officer is a rare breed, but they are also known as the chief Machiavellian officer. They're the ultimate puppet master. You have the chief mood officer. That's the the CMO who's able to lighten the mood. They're able to diffuse tension. The most common one, the most common mutation, the most common breed is this chief meaning officer, because I think for us as marketers, the most natural tendency is to be a chief meaning officer. And then there's a chief momentum officer. Chief momentum officer is the person that's all about getting shit done, like it's about moving. And as we started to look at all this information, speak to people like Mark Ritson to validate, like, is this helpful or is this bullshit? And because Ritson's going to call BS on this if it is the reality is to be a successful CMO, you need to adopt each of these different aspects into how you drive influence depending on the situation. We then developed a quiz, and we're going to put the QR code up so any of you can take it to understand what's your dominant type. And I want to have our two CMOs share what their where they came out on and how it resonated. I'm going to start with you, Jennifer, because yours was a bit surprising, but then when we talked about it, it wasn't a surprise.
That's right. So I was like, I don't even need to take this quiz. Of course, I'm a chief meaning officer. At GSD&M, my agency experience, we worked on Walmart was a big account, always low prices on the brand you trust. They really cared about giving everybody access. Southwest Airlines, Want to Get Away, all these things. And so I loved working on businesses that obviously had great meaning behind them and sought those out. And then I joined Indeed because our mission was helping people get jobs, and it was authentic. Everyone you talked to there, from the CEO on down, was like, at the time, money was good and profit was good. And so you heard a lot of, really, it's not about for us, the employer side, which is where we make the money. We're just here to help you get jobs. So I was very attracted to that. So I'm like, oh, of course it's meaning. And I took it and it said momentum. And so then I was like, well, and I had to really think about it, but it's because the moments we're in, and I'm sure a lot of us are in those moments where you're having to drive transformation right now across everything you do. And we've got a strategy and it's set, but right now where I'm really spending my energy is how do we realign our resources and our processes and everything to deliver on a completely new strategy. And I wake up kind of living and breathing that. And so it made me think that I bet we all go maybe in and out of some of these depending on the moment. Like, they all resonated with me, and I could see that there were times that, okay, I've played that role. And so the meaning officer is my natural state. But the moment I am in is in momentum, and I think that's what showed up in the quiz.
Yeah, that resonates with me a lot. I just took my quiz with Gabe upstairs, and it's a really thoughtful quiz. You should definitely take it. I think the QR code was up there. It's confessionsofacmo.com, correct?
Yeah, we'll have a link at the end of it. If you missed it, you can go to the website, read all the content, the podcast with Ritson and everything else.
Great, yeah. And when I took it, I didn't know what to expect. I also got Chief Momentum Officer, surprise. So I was excited to see that. It made sense as I sort of unpacked it, mainly because, I'm working at Coinbase. There's an inherently cyclical nature that goes with crypto. And for those of you not following along, we are in a bitter, cold winter right now, despite the temperatures here in Cannes. And even though crypto is obviously way more about the prices, it is sort of reflective of what crypto prices are at that moment. And what's really interesting is that I think culturally, it is sometimes fun to build in a winter because it just forces so much focus. So you might be surprised to hear that, the bulk of our entire C-suite at Coinbase often talks about how they prefer to operate in a winter because it brings really just a lot more clarity to the organization, because you're forced to cut a lot of things. You have fewer priorities, more direction, and people are able to really rally around a single sort of focused topic. And on the marketing side, I definitely relate to that, mainly because, in those environments where you have to batten down the hatches, it can actually force a lot of creativity. Like, the constraints and the boundaries that are enforced on you, and oftentimes those are budgetary, can cause you to be very stringent and clear-headed in making decisions. And so for the current moment that I'm in, I definitely think I am Chief Momentum Officer because I'm trying to keep the team engaged, rallied, and focused on the things that matter, when in reality, we've had to cut a lot of things that at the beginning of 2025 we thought we'd be able to do, and we just don't have the budget to do it.
So I want to reveal a few of my favorite quotes that were anonymous from the study, and we can talk about them. And the first one is this idea of there is a thing about marketing and creativity that is still a bit of dark art and magic. Either of you want to comment on this one? We go to the next one that we actually prepared for as well.
I'm happy to comment on it, assuming I'm understanding it's the art and the science that still you have to.
It's more about the dark arts of influence.
Like selling things in.
Selling in, but so let's get more specific.
Okay.
So this one here. So sometimes I need to market to my CEO the same way I market to customers, with emotion and not logic. And so this maybe goes back a little bit to that point that you said, that once you become CMO, are you actually spending more of your time understanding your internal audiences and marketing to them, and less time actually trying to understand customers? Do you agree with that in your situation? Is it true?
I wouldn't say less time understanding customers, because I feel like that is usually how you can influence the C-suite. But I would say I spend a lot of time thinking about cross-functional partners across the enterprise. I was at a CMO like all-day function on Sunday, and something that came out there, they asked the question, how much time do you spend with your direct team versus across the enterprise, your partners, with sales, with the HR organization, product, and all of that? And most people said, well, I spend probably 70% with my team, but there was a huge belief you should spend like 20% with your team, and the majority of your time cross-functionally working with partners to bring the organization together, get them on board with the ideas. And I think that was a big light bulb moment for all of us. And I think you do that through bringing customer insight to the table. Like, you have to be the voice of the customer in the room. And I think that drives influence, because you can all day long say, well, here's what I think, and here's this brilliant idea. But if you are sharing it based on customer insight, I find that's a uniter across the entire company. Everyone's like, okay, I get that, And so to me, it's still a great tool, and it's critical that we represent the voice when we go into those rooms, and that's how we drive influence.
I can add to that.
Please.
Yeah. I think I completely +1 everything that Jennifer just said. It's obviously like through the lens of the customer first. I think what's really interesting during my brief time at Coinbase so far, I started less than a year ago. I feel very lucky to work for a founder CEO who cares deeply about brand and marketing in a way that even I couldn't have anticipated before I started. He is constantly challenging and provoking the marketing team to go bolder, to go bigger, and to really break through in order to capture people's attention. He cares deeply about every marketing activation that we have, the words that we use, and he is often provoking us to really mean what we say and show up authentically. And having sort of the air cover of a CEO that's truly fearless and has just perhaps the largest appetite for risk I've ever seen is an incredible privilege and like quite a platform from which to market.
I just have to build on +1 to your +1 and my +1.
Two.
That is
two. I'm a marketer that does math. That's 2.
Oh, okay. Thank you. No, but that is so critical, and something I've also learned. Like, I had that at Radio Shack. Our CEO was a past CMO, and he loved brand, he loved marketing, and I feel like I did my best work. That is when I really felt like I could hit my stride, because he was fearless. We did the, I don't know if anyone saw the 80s called, and they want their store back Super Bowl spot that we did together. But I remember, I was like, here's one that's kind of crazy, because we're admitting to the world that like people think we're stuck in the 80s. And so we're just going to like embrace that and show them how we've changed. And, it's a little risky, and he's like, yeah, do that. And it's just it makes such a difference when you spend your time on how do I get to the best, biggest, boldest ideas versus selling, selling all the time. Like, here's why it matters and all of that. But every CMO that you meet and talk to, like, there are so many different environments out there, and it's really important you understand what is the environment I'm in, because that really dictates what the role of that CMO is and where they're going to spend their time. And you're totally right. It depends. It depends on the CEO and if he is someone who has that kind of background or not.
And so that change in CEO is probably the single biggest. I mean, we're using Darwinism metaphors here, right? The biggest risk to is when there's a CEO change, and you've just gone through that, right? Everything's going nice and smoothly. I understand how the CEO sees me. I've built up my influence, and then a new CEO comes in.
That's right.
How do you what?
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah, it was just, and they're both great, right? But different. Like our prior CEO certainly was all about, they're both about our mission, helping people get jobs. Prior CMO CEO very heart led, and I spent so much time working with him on getting to what our brand was all about. Because when I started there, they had done performance marketing, no brand, and said, I want you to come in, help us build our brand. But they thought brand equaled TV ad too. So I had to go through a lot of what brand is, and it's everything. And so, but we had a great, working relationship and understood each other, but it took a while to build. I invested a lot in that. And then he left about a year ago, and our chairman came in to be our CEO, and he's great, but very much more of a performance mindset, performance marketer. And, brand drives performance, work across the funnel, but very much believes more in the search and search marketing and having to prove every cent that we, spend and all of that. So it's just different again. It's you have to also, I think you had a chief, what is it? Not mood. Yeah, mood was a good one, but where you kind of shape shift.
Yeah, the missing.
Oh, maybe.
Mood officer?
What? Chief mood officer. Yeah, it's that's been a big part of my job right now too, is keeping the mood of the team up, understanding what it takes to sell in to him is very different than what it took us just a year ago.
So this is a great segue to the next quote, which is, in this role, you're creating the conditions for the organization to buy an idea. You're not selling an idea. You just said you have a new CEO who's performance marketing led, and you have just launched one of the most interesting, experiential, never been done before thing at Indeed. I'm going to talk about it because it's so awesome, and then you can talk about the influence behind it. So I don't know if any of you have seen. Well, firstly, there's a World Cup going on. You kind of wouldn't know it here in France, in many places. And one of the things that Indeed did, and it's so true to the brand, they created a job which is Chief World Cup Watcher, and set up a glass box in Times Square with a sofa and had people send videos to apply to get this job. There are 2 people who got the job, and you can walk around Times Square and there's a glass box and you can watch them watch the games. How did I do?
You did great. I was I don't even know where you're going, but I'm so excited you went there because, we're very proud of that.
So
Yeah.
you just talked about the importance of how did you then, create something so brand and experiential. Was there any convincing that needed to be done internally, and kind of how did you convince people that it was right to do this?
Honestly, it was an easy one to sell in because of it's a great way to demonstrate our product too. So to me, I looked at it as a win-win-win. We were able to participate in the World Cup without being a World Cup sponsor. That in itself, kind of working with legal, and we did this in partnership with Fox. And so they helped a ton. They actually made the hire. We were the hiring partner. But then it gave me a platform to not only talk about this as hey, we help people get jobs, we're filling these important jobs, and we're doing it through, our new profile product where a job seeker comes in, tells them all about themselves and their skills beyond their resume, and our sourcing and screening product on the employer side that helps them spot out of thousands of resumes the 2 perfect candidates. So it's been a home run, because what we're asked, and we should be doing, is how do you always bring product in? But it's like, how do you do it in an interesting, fun way that brings the benefits to life? And so that one was a little bit easier to sell, because we were talking about product, and we're seeing, lift in traffic and branded search and interest. So we're looking at it as, how do we do more of these now?
That's
Okay.
really cool and awesome that you're keeping Indeed so relevant.
Thank you.
Our final quote is, marketing is the lightning rod for every irrational thing a company does. So a quick answer to wrap this up. In your experience, and not just at the company you're in, what is the most irrational thing that you've seen marketing get blamed for?
Anytime business is down. I don't know. I'm trying to think, but sales. No, but really, it's like, I'm sure a lot of us feel this way. It's like you can have a campaign, and if business is doing well, a lot of times it's not all about that. But sometimes when business isn't doing as well, it's like, you got to change the marketing, quick. And it's like, wait a minute, all our metrics are showing success, so maybe we need to diagnose the whole company and see what's driving it. So to me, sometimes I feel like it's an easy one to blame.
And you get all the credit when things are going well, right?
Oh, of course, no. So,
Yeah, I think Jennifer makes a great point. It's part of the reason why one thing that's really important to how I lead the team is really just enforcing a really strong retro culture. So we retro all the time. Sometimes we even postmortem. And I'd say that the thing that's important about that is we like to invite our cross-functional peers into the room and honestly rip us to shreds. Everyone's kind of been in that room as a marketer, where someone who claims to know a whole lot about marketing but doesn't sit on the marketing team is basically critiquing every aspect of the campaign that you run. And I actually think it's really important to hear from all of those voices and not try to avoid that room or box those people out, because if you do that, you may end up insulating your team or feeling protected or not having to deal with the hard feedback. But you probably will also never do anything that's very exciting or interesting if you try to avoid inviting those people into that room. And so we really try to embrace that kind of discomfort and just inviting all opinions into the retro, just so we can be really intellectually honest about what it is that we're learning. And, oftentimes we do miss. And that's some of the most important lessons that I've learned in my career.
I love that. I just want to build on that as well, because it has been an important lesson with our new CEO coming on board. One of the pieces of feedback he gave us, and it was absolutely true, he started meetings called the Growth Loop meetings for job seeker and employers, and it's us and product and everybody together. Every other week we have to share what we've done in marketing and what the impact was, and which has been great at bringing us together. And at first, we were showing all of the good, look at, this great performance we've driven here and here. And he's like, so you'll never do anything that didn't perform well? And it made us really think, if we want to go and build trust across the company, we've got to share our failures as much as we share our wins, to your point about let's have an honest conversation and be more vulnerable. And that has helped us build so much more trust, where maybe they're less likely to blame marketing, because we've brought them into the fold and we're honest when we try things and it doesn't work as well. And that's been a lesson for us, because we were, we wanted to go in and show our great work. So.
Totally.
Jen, Kat, thank you so much.